I still remember the exact moment my life changed forever. It was a Tuesday night, around 11 p.m., and I was making my rounds at the Pinewood Senior Living Center. Mrs. Bellamy, a 78-year-old woman in room 14, the one everyone said had lost her mind, grabbed my wrist with a grip so strong it startled me. She pulled me close, her eyes sharp and clear, nothing like the vacant stare she usually wore, and whispered, "Don't drink the tea tomorrow. Whatever you do, don't let the residents drink it either, especially not Mr. Harding in room 6. They're going to kill him, and if you get in the way, they'll kill you too." Then she let go, closed her eyes, and went back to looking like a confused old woman mumbling about butterflies. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me start from the beginning. My name is Lena Cole. When all this happened, I was 29 years old, though I looked closer to 40. That's what 2 years of working double shifts and raising a little brother on your own will do to a person. My brother, Isaiah, was 11. Our mother passed from lupus complications when he was 9, and our father had been gone long before that. Left when Isaiah was 3. Just walked out one morning and never came back. No note, no phone call, nothing. So it was just me and my brother, living in a one-bedroom apartment on the south side of Milwaukee, trying to make it work. I got a job as a night shift aide at Pinewood Senior Living Center about 14 months before everything happened. It wasn't glamorous. The building was an old converted office complex on the outskirts of the city, brick and concrete, always smelling like bleach and boiled vegetables. There were 22 residents, mostly elderly folks whose families either couldn't care for them or didn't want to. My job was to check vitals, change bedding, administer evening medications, and make sure nobody wandered off in the middle of the night. The pay was $14.50 an hour. After taxes, it barely covered rent, food, and Isaiah's school supplies. I had no health insurance. I was 2 months behind on the electric bill, and I owed $600 to the clinic that treated Isaiah's asthma last winter. Every single day was a math problem I couldn't solve. How do you stretch $900 into $1,400 worth of bills? You don't. You just pick which ones to pay and which ones to ignore and hope nobody shuts anything off before the next paycheck. I'd leave Isaiah at home at 10 p.m. every night. He was responsible for his age, did his homework, locked the door, and went to bed by 10:30. I'd set my phone to ring at 6:30 a.m., right when I got home, so I could wake him up for school, make him oatmeal or toast, walk him to the bus stop, then collapse on the couch and sleep until 2 p.m. when he came home. Then I'd help with homework, make dinner, and do it all over again. I was exhausted down to my bones. Some mornings I'd sit in the parking lot of Pinewood after my shift and just cry. Not about anything specific, just from the weight of it all. Then I'd wipe my face, drive home, and be a mother to my little brother because that's what you do. The director of Pinewood was a man named Dale Crenshaw. He was in his late 40s, always wore pressed khakis and polo shirts with the facility logo on them, and he smiled too much. Not the kind of smile that makes you feel warm, the kind that makes you check your pockets. He'd been running Pinewood for about 3 years, and from what I could tell, he ran it like a budget motel. Cut every corner, hire as few people as possible, and charge the families top dollar. There were supposed to be 3 aides on the night shift. Most nights, it was just me and one other person, a woman named Greta who was 62 and moved slow because of her bad hip. Sometimes it was just me alone. When I asked Crenshaw about hiring more staff, he'd lean back in his chair and say, "Lena, we're running lean. That's how you stay in business. You're doing a great job. Keep it up." Then he'd go back to his phone. The residents were mostly sweet. Mr. Patterson in room 2 always wanted to tell me about his time in the Korean War. Miss Dolores in room 9 liked me to braid her hair before bed. Mr. Harding in room 6 was quiet, barely spoke, but he'd nod when I brought his medication and sometimes pat my hand like a grandfather would. And then there was Mrs. Bellamy in room 14. Everyone at Pinewood said Mrs. Bellamy had advanced dementia. She'd been there for 2 years. Her file said she had no living relatives. Her care was paid through a trust managed by a law firm downtown. She spent most of her days sitting in a wheelchair by the window, staring outside, occasionally murmuring things that didn't make sense. The other aides ignored her mostly. They'd feed her, change her, and move on. But I noticed things about Mrs. Bellamy that didn't add up. Sometimes, late at night, when the hallway was quiet and I was doing my rounds, I'd catch her reading, not staring at a book blankly, actually reading, her eyes moving line by line, her finger tracing the words. One night I walked in and she was doing a crossword puzzle, in pen. She saw me and immediately crumpled the paper and started humming to herself, rocking back and forth like she didn't know where she was. I didn't say anything, but I started paying attention. I began bringing her little things, an extra blanket when the heat was acting up, a cup of chamomile tea, sometimes a muffin from the break room. She never thanked me out loud, but she'd look at me with those sharp blue eyes for just a second before going back to her act. That was her thank you. One night, about 6 months in, I was sitting with her while she ate her pudding. The hall was empty. I whispered, "Mrs. Bellamy, you don't have to pretend with me." She stopped eating, looked at me for a long time. Then, in a voice that was perfectly clear, she said, "You're a kind girl, Lena. Be careful who you're kind to in this place. Not everyone deserves it." Then she went back to her pudding and started humming again. That was the first time I knew for sure. She wasn't confused at all. She was hiding. I didn't push her on it. I figured she had her reasons. Maybe she was afraid of something. Maybe she just wanted to be left alone. Either way, I kept bringing her tea and blankets, and she kept giving me those quick, sharp looks that said more than words. Months passed. Isaiah turned 11. I baked him a cake from a box mix and bought him a pair of sneakers from the clearance rack at the outlet store. He hugged me so tight I thought my ribs would crack. "You're the best, Lena," he said. I held him and thought, "I'm just trying to keep us afloat, little man." At work, things started getting strange. Crenshaw began coming in at odd hours, sometimes at 2 or 3 a.m. He'd go straight to his office, lock the door, and stay for an hour or two. Sometimes I'd hear him on the phone, his voice low and tense. A few times, other people came with him, men I'd never seen before, wearing suits that looked expensive, carrying briefcases. They never acknowledged me. They'd walk past like I wasn't there. One night, I was restocking the medication cabinet in the supply room when I heard voices coming from Crenshaw's office next door. The walls were thin. I wasn't trying to eavesdrop. I just couldn't help but hear. "The Harding account is worth $2.3 million, a man's voice said. "Not Crenshaw, someone else, deeper, colder. Once he's gone, the trust reverts to the designated beneficiary. That's us, through the shell company. Same as the Morrison account and the Perkins account." "And the timeline?" Crenshaw asked. 2 weeks, maybe 3. It has to look natural. Gradual decline. The attending physician signs off, and it's done. Same protocol as the others. My blood went cold. I stood frozen in the supply room, a box of latex gloves in my hand, barely breathing. "What about the Cole girl?" the other voice asked. "She's attentive. She notices things." "She's nobody," Crenshaw said. "High school diploma, barely making rent. She's not going to figure anything out, and if she does, she's replaceable." I heard a chair scrape. I quietly set down the gloves, slipped out of the supply room, and walked back to the hallway on shaking legs. They were killing residents. For money. They were killing old people who had no families to ask questions, draining their estates through shell companies, and making it look like natural causes. I wanted to throw up. I wanted to scream. Instead, I finished my shift, drove home, woke up Isaiah, made him breakfast, walked him to the bus, and sat on the kitchen floor hyperventilating for 20 minutes. What was I supposed to do? Go to the police? I had no proof. I didn't even know the name of the other man. All I had was something I overheard through a wall. They'd say I was tired, confused, making it up. And if Crenshaw found out I'd talked, what would happen to me? To Isaiah? He said I was replaceable. I knew what that meant. For 3 days, I went to work and said nothing. I smiled at Crenshaw when he walked past. I did my rounds. I checked on Mrs. Bellamy. I brought her tea. My hands trembled every time I passed room 6 and saw Mr. Harding sleeping peacefully, not knowing what they had planned for him. It was eating me alive. I couldn't sleep. I couldn't eat, Isaiah noticed. "Lena, you look sick," he said one afternoon. "Are you okay?" "I'm fine, baby, just tired." But I wasn't fine. On the 4th night, I broke. I was sitting with Mrs. Bellamy at 1A, and she looked at me with those eyes, those knowing eyes, and I just started crying, silently, tears rolling down my face while I sat in the chair next to her bed. She reached over and took my hand. "Tell me," she said quietly, clearly, no act. And I told her everything. The voices, the trust accounts, the shell company, Mr. Harding, the timeline. She listened without moving, without blinking. When I finished, she was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "I knew it. I've been in this room for 2 years watching them circle like vultures. 3 residents died on my floor since I've been here, all of them wealthy, all of them alone. I suspected it, but I had no proof." "Why are you pretending to be confused?" I asked. Her jaw tightened. "Because 8 years ago, I was one of the most effective prosecutors in the state of Wisconsin. My name is Eleanor Bellamy. I put away embezzlers, money launderers, corrupt officials. When I retired, my stepson, a man I'd raised from the time he was 12, tried to have me declared incompetent so he could take control of my assets. I came here to disappear. I set up a trust so he couldn't touch my money, and I let everyone think I'd lost my mind. It was the safest place I could think of." I stared at her. A prosecutor. This frail-looking woman in a wheelchair was a former prosecutor. "Can you help me stop them?" I whispered. "I can do more than that," she said, "but you have to trust me, and you have to be brave." Over the next week, Mrs. Bellamy became a different person behind closed doors. She told me exactly what to look for and how to find it. She explained that the key evidence would be in the medication logs. If they were slowly poisoning residents, they were likely altering dosages or adding something to routine medications. She told me to photograph everything: the logs, the supply orders, any documents in Crenshaw's office I could access. "Use your phone," she said. "Take pictures when no one's around. The logs are your most important evidence. Compare what's prescribed with what's being administered. If there are discrepancies, that's your proof." I was terrified. But every night, after I settled the residents, I'd pull up the medication logs on the computer at the nurse's station. I photographed every page for the past 6 months. Then I cross-referenced them with the pharmacy delivery records in the supply room. And there it was, clear as day. 3 residents who had died in the past 18 months, all of them had their medication changed in the weeks before their deaths. Small increases, nothing dramatic, but consistent. And the changes weren't authorized by the attending physician. Someone was entering the modifications directly into the system using an administrative login. Mrs. Bellamy studied the photos on my phone and nodded slowly. "That's your case. But you need one more thing. You need to catch them in the act." That's when she told me about the tea. Every Wednesday, the kitchen prepared a special herbal tea for the evening. It was Crenshaw's idea, a wellness initiative he'd introduced 6 months ago. The residents loved it. The staff served it after dinner, and everyone drank it. Mrs. Bellamy told me she'd noticed that the residents who died had all received a slightly different cup, always brought to them personally by Crenshaw or the night manager. "This Wednesday," she said, "don't drink it. Don't let anyone in your care drink it, especially not Mr. Harding, and watch who delivers his cup." That was 4 days away. 4 days of walking around Pinewood with a knot in my stomach, smiling at Crenshaw, pretending everything was normal. On the 3rd day, she grabbed my wrist and gave me the warning I told you about at the beginning of this story. On Wednesday night, I was ready. Mrs. Bellamy had told me to call a specific number, a former colleague of hers at the Wisconsin Department of Justice, a man named Richard Morse. She'd written the number on a scrap of paper and tucked it into my palm 2 nights earlier. Call him Wednesday afternoon. Tell him everything. Tell him my name. He'll know what to do. At 3 p.m., before my shift, while Isaiah was doing homework at the kitchen table, I made the call. A man answered. Gruff voice, professional. "Morse. My name is Lena Cole. I work at Pinewood Senior Living Center. I have evidence that the director is murdering residents for their estate money. Eleanor Bellamy told me to call you." Dead silence. "Then, Eleanor is alive?" "Yes, sir. She's been living here for 2 years. She's the one who helped me find the evidence." Another pause. "Don't do anything. I'll be there tonight with a team. Keep everyone safe until then. I drove to work with my hands shaking so bad I almost missed the turn into the parking lot. My shift started at 10 p.m. I did everything normal. Checked vitals, changed bedding, chatted with Miss Dolores. Read to Mr. Patterson. At 11 p.m., the kitchen staff brought up the tea tray, same as every Wednesday. I watched from the hallway as one of the kitchen workers set cups on the tray. Then I saw Crenshaw walk into the kitchen. He stayed for about 2 minutes. When he came out, he was carrying a single cup, separate from the tray. He walked down the hall toward room 6, Mr. Harding's room. My heart was slamming against my ribs. I stepped into the hallway and said, "Mr. Crenshaw, I'll take that. I'm heading that way." He looked at me, surprised. "It's fine. I've got it." "I insist," I said, reaching for the cup with a smile. "You've got enough on your plate. Let me—" He held on to it for a second too long. Our eyes met. Something flickered in his. Suspicion. But he let go. "Sure. Make sure he drinks all of it." "Of course." I took the cup to the nurse's station, set it down, and placed a piece of tape over the top so it couldn't be confused with any other cup. That was evidence. Then I brought Mr. Harding a fresh cup from the regular tray and sat with him while he drank it. At midnight, 3 unmarked cars pulled into the parking lot. No sirens, no lights. Richard Morse walked in with 6 investigators and 2 state police officers. He was a tall man with silver hair and the kind of face that had seen everything and was tired of most of it. I met him at the front entrance and led them to the nurse's station. I showed them the cup with the tape on it, the medication logs on my phone, the pharmacy records, everything. Morse looked at the evidence, looked at me, and said, "You did good, kid." They arrested Crenshaw in his office at 12:45 a.m. He was on the phone with someone. When they cuffed him, he looked at me with pure venom. "You little—" The officer pulled him away before he could finish. By 2 a.m., the state police had seized all the records. The lab would later confirm that the tea in the taped cup contained a concentrated cardiac glycoside, a plant-based toxin that mimics heart failure in elderly patients. They found traces of the same substance in the archived blood work of the 3 residents who had died. 3 people. 3 innocent people who trusted the place that was supposed to care for them. Crenshaw and 2 associates, including the man whose voice I'd heard through the wall, were charged with 3 counts of first-degree murder and 1 count of attempted murder. The estate fraud totaled over $4.6 million. The night they took Crenshaw away, I went to Mrs. Bellamy's room. She was sitting up in her wheelchair, wide awake. When she saw me, she smiled. A real smile, the first full one I'd ever seen from her. "You did it, Lena." "We did it," I said. She held out her hand and I took it. We sat there in the quiet, the hallway lights humming, and I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Safe. In the weeks that followed, my life turned upside down in the best possible way. Richard Morse made sure I was recognized for my role in the case. The state awarded me $75,000 through the Witness Protection and Cooperation Fund. I sat on my kitchen floor and stared at the check for 10 minutes straight. Then I picked up Isaiah from school, took him to the diner on 4th Street, and let him order anything he wanted. He got a double cheeseburger, onion rings, a chocolate shake, and a slice of pie. "Are we rich?" he asked with ketchup on his chin. I laughed for the first time in months. "No, baby, but we're going to be okay." Mrs. Bellamy's story became public during the trial. Eleanor Bellamy, former star prosecutor, hiding in a nursing home for 2 years. The media went wild. Her stepson, who learned she was alive and well, tried to challenge her trust again. She shut him down in a single court appearance, representing herself, at 78 years old, in a wheelchair, with the sharpest legal mind in the room. The judge ruled in her favor in under 30 minutes. After the trial, Mrs. Bellamy moved out of Pinewood and into a small house near the lake that her trust purchased for her. She had a garden, a porch, and a view of the water. I visited her every Sunday. Isaiah came with me. She'd make him lemonade and quiz him on his vocabulary words, and he loved every minute of it. He started calling her Grandma Eleanor, and she never corrected him. One Sunday afternoon, she sat me down on her porch and said, "Lena, what do you want to do with your life? And don't say survive. I already know you can do that." I thought about it. Really thought. "I want to take care of people," I said. But I want to do it right. I want to be a nurse. A real nurse. With a degree and a license. I want to work somewhere that actually helps people. She nodded. Then that's what you'll do. She paused. I'm setting up a scholarship fund for women in caregiving who want to advance their education. You're going to be the first recipient. I opened my mouth and nothing came out. Tears just started falling. Don't you cry on me, Lena Cole, she said, but her own eyes were glistening. You earned this. Every sleepless night, every double shift, every time you brought me tea when no one else even looked my way. You earned every bit of this. I enrolled in the nursing program at Milwaukee Area Technical College that fall. The scholarship covered tuition and books. The state money covered rent and Isaiah's needs for the first time with room to spare. I hired a college student named Marcus to stay with Isaiah on the nights I had class. School was hard. I hadn't been in a classroom in 10 years. But I studied on the bus, in the break room, at the kitchen table after Isaiah went to bed. Mrs. Bellamy helped me with my papers, editing them with the same precision she'd once used on legal briefs. Your grammar is atrocious, she'd say, handing back my essays covered in red ink. But your heart is in the right place. Fix the commas. It was during my second semester that I met James. James Alden. He was 32, a physical therapist who ran a small rehab clinic on the west side. We met because he was one of the guest speakers in my anatomy and physiology class. He talked about patient recovery, about how healing isn't just physical, it's emotional, spiritual, relational. I raised my hand and asked a question about post-stroke rehabilitation because I'd seen so many residents at Pinewood struggle with it. After class, he came up to me. That was a good question, he said. You've got experience. 14 months at a long-term care facility, I said. The one that was on the news? Pinewood? I nodded. He looked at me with something that wasn't pity. It was respect. You're the one who blew the whistle. I had help. He smiled. Can I buy you a coffee? I'd love to hear more. We went to the coffee shop across the street from the campus and talked for 2 hours. He told me about growing up in Green Bay, about how his grandmother's stroke when he was 16 inspired him to go into physical therapy. I told him about Isaiah, about my mother, about the years of scraping by. He listened the way good people listen, leaning in, asking questions, never interrupting. We started seeing each other. It was slow, careful, the way two people who've both been hurt learn to build something real. He met Isaiah, and they bonded over basketball and bad jokes. He met Mrs. Bellamy, and she interrogated him for 45 minutes about his finances, his family, and his intentions. He passed. He's a decent man, she told me afterward. Don't mess it up. A year and a half later, I graduated. Top of my class, Isaiah was in the front row, whistling so loud the dean looked over. Mrs. Bellamy was next to him, sitting straight in her wheelchair, clapping with a dignity that made everyone around her sit up a little taller. I got a job at St. Anne's Medical Center, a real hospital with real resources and people who actually cared about their patients. The pay was more than double what I'd made at Pinewood. For the first time in my life, I wasn't counting pennies. I could buy Isaiah new clothes that weren't from the clearance rack. I could put food in the fridge without doing math first. James proposed on a Wednesday evening. We were sitting on Mrs. Bellamy's porch, watching the sun go down over the lake. Isaiah was inside, helping her with a jigsaw puzzle. James took my hand and said, "Lena, I've been trying to find the perfect moment, but I realized every moment with you is the perfect moment." He pulled out a ring, simple gold band with a small diamond. "Will you marry me?" I looked at his face, kind and steady and real, and I said yes before he even finished the question. The wedding was small. We held it in Mrs. Bellamy's backyard, under a canopy of string lights that James and Isaiah hung between the trees. There were 30 guests, mostly friends from the hospital, James's family from Green Bay, and a few neighbors. Isaiah was the best man. He wore a suit that was slightly too big and grinned the entire ceremony. Mrs. Bellamy sat in the front row in a navy blue dress with a pearl brooch. When the time came for toasts, she raised her glass, and the yard went quiet. Everyone knew her story by then. "I want to say something about kindness," she began. Her voice was clear and strong, the voice of a woman who had stood in courtrooms and commanded attention. 2 years ago, I was hiding from the world. I had given up on people. I thought if I pretended to be invisible, I'd be safe. And then this young woman started bringing me tea. Not because she had to, not because anyone told her to, but because she saw me. She looked at a confused old woman in a wheelchair, and she saw a person. That small act of seeing someone, truly seeing them, it changed everything. It saved lives, including mine. She paused. Lena didn't just uncover a crime, she reminded me that courage isn't the absence of fear. It's a girl making $14.50 an hour, raising her brother alone, terrified out of her mind, and still doing the right thing because she couldn't live with herself if she didn't. That's courage. That's grace. She raised her glass higher. To Lena and James, may your home always be full of the same kindness that brought you together. Everyone clapped. I walked over and hugged her, and she held me tight, her thin arms surprisingly strong. "I'm proud of you," she whispered. So proud. Life after the wedding was the kind of ordinary I'd always dreamed about. James and I rented a 2-bedroom house near the lake so Isaiah could ride his bike to Mrs. Bellamy's anytime he wanted. I worked the day shift at St. Anne's. James ran his clinic and started a pro bono program for elderly patients who couldn't afford rehab. Mrs. Bellamy volunteered as a legal advisor for a nonprofit that helped elderly abuse victims. A year later, our daughter was born. We named her Ruby, after my mother, when I placed her in Mrs. Bellamy's arms for the first time. The old woman looked down at that tiny face, and tears streamed silently down her cheeks. "Another chance," she whispered. "That's what this little girl is. Another chance for all of us." We asked her to be Ruby's godmother. She tried to argue. "I'm too old. I'm too set in my ways. I'll spoil her rotten." But she accepted, and she did spoil her rotten. With books, with stories, with the kind of fierce, unwavering love that comes from someone who knows exactly how precious life is. Isaiah is 14 now. He's on the honor roll. He wants to be a lawyer, like Grandma Eleanor, he says. She's already picked out the law school she thinks he should attend. James and I opened a second clinic together, combining nursing and physical therapy for elderly patients recovering from strokes and falls. We called it Second Chance Rehabilitation. Mrs. Bellamy designed the logo herself, a hand reaching out to another hand. Sometimes, on Sunday evenings, all of us gather on Mrs. Bellamy's porch. Me, James, Isaiah, little Ruby crawling around on a blanket, and Eleanor Bellamy watching us with those sharp blue eyes that see everything. We drink lemonade and talk about the week, and laugh about nothing and everything. One of those evenings, I said something I'd been thinking for a long time. "Mrs. Bellamy, do you ever think about what would have happened if I hadn't brought you that first cup of tea?" She looked at me and smiled. "I do, and it terrifies me. Not for me, for Mr. Harding, for the others who might have come after him." 1 cup of tea. Lena. That's all it took. One small kindness from a tired girl who had every reason in the world to just keep walking. James squeezed my hand. Isaiah was teaching Ruby to clap. The fireflies were blinking over the lake. "Kindness is never wasted," Mrs. Bellamy said, looking out at the water. "It might seem small when you do it. A cup of tea, a warm blanket, a moment of your time. But it plants a seed, and that seed grows in ways you can never predict. It saves lives. It builds families. It turns strangers into something like blood." She reached over and patted my hand, the same way Mr. Harding used to pat mine during those long nights at Pinewood. "You remember that, Lena. And when Ruby is old enough, you tell her that her mother changed the world with a cup of tea and a stubborn heart." I looked at my family gathered on that porch, the brother I raised, the husband who saw me before I saw myself, the daughter who carried my mother's name, and the fierce old woman who taught me that courage and kindness are the same thing. And I knew she was right. Kindness always finds its way home. If you liked my story and want to hear more, go ahead and subscribe to my channel. If you'd like to support me, you can do it through Super Thanks. It would mean a lot. In the comments, tell me which city you're watching from and what time it is so I can see how far my story reaches. I've added 2 more life stories on the screen just for you. Click one now, and let's keep spending time together. Much love.